Well, thank you, everyone. Good morning to everyone here. As Maria said, my name is Andre Chilio. I'm partner at the Foley & Lardner. We're a full one-stop shop law firm. I do a lot of work with LATAM, and it's an honor for me actually to be able to spend an hour or so with Hans. So Hans, I'll start. For those who have been under a rock for about 30 years, can you talk a little bit about you, your background, and what you've been doing at GGV for the past decade?
Sure. I joined GGV in 2013. GGV started in 2000 in Silicon Valley and Singapore, so quite global from the start. And in 2003, GGV made this investment in Asia, in China for the very first time. And it was a very expensive valuation. The company ends up being Alibaba, and the valuation was very expensive, $180 million. And the reason they were able to invest in Alibaba at the time was Goldman Sachs wanted to sell. Goldman invested in Series A at a $30 million valuation and did 5x in 4 years. And the partners in New York want to get out of China and get out of the internet, so thought it was a good investment to exit. And then we ended up not holding it for too long either. We at GGV ended up holding a $10 billion valuation, then $33 billion, and then exited in 2011, 2012, and today it ends up being a much bigger outcome. So that lesson kind of shaped a lot of how we think about things. That emerging markets are always interesting. You have to pay attention, and for the best companies, they have a lot more runway and upside than we thought was possible. And I joined, started my VC career with Bessemer here in Silicon Valley. And that's when Bessemer invested in LinkedIn, in Yelp, later on in Pinterest. So how they did investments in consumer internet kind of shaped me, how I think about things. So when I went to China with Bessemer, we started looking at initially semiconductor space. And all the reason that people thought semiconductor makes sense today was the same factors 15 years ago, but China just wasn't ready for semiconductor investment at the time, so we pivoted to do more consumer internet. And ended up joining a fund in Shanghai called Qiming. That's where I made two investments that become massive. One was Xiaomi from day one, 20 million pre, and today's still 25 billion market cap company. The other one is Dipping, which merged with Meituan. I invested in Dipping about 180 million. And today Meituan is about an $80 billion market cap company. So saw a lot in China, and one of our very good friends, Hugo Barra, is in the audience, and he joined Xiaomi in 2013 and really helped Xiaomi to expand globally. And you see companies that can really innovate from anywhere in the world and become very global everywhere. Well, that makes it easier for me to have the guts to bet on something like Musical.ly, which turned into TikTok by encouraging music to sell to the ByteDance. And so seeing companies like that break out it makes the job much more interesting and fun.
So we've seen an enormous capital deployment in 2021, like the numbers of which we hadn't seen before, and around the world. And obviously, emerging markets like LATAM, Brazil was no different in other emerging markets throughout the world. Now we're seeing what people might be calling a correction, some might be calling a potential recession. What do you see the next, and this is I'm flipping, because typically people ask you at the end of, right? So let's mix it up a little bit. What do you see the next 12 to 18 months, if that's sort of the cycle, and how do you see emerging economies and therefore the emerging tech system sort of adapting or going through this tide?
Yeah. I think there's a recent debate between Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk on are we in a recession or not. And authorities like Lauren Summers also chiming in about this. You see dollar definitely appreciating against emerging market currencies. Yet internally, looking at the US, there's just a lot of doom and gloom kind of prognosis. So we don't have a house view per se, so what I'm sharing is just me personally looking at our own data points on our portfolio. Our property portfolio definitely is down by quite a bit. It's the biggest drop that I have seen in my career since 2000. Even 2008 wasn't as big a drop as this. Our private company, on average, we look at our entire portfolio, 78% by value have cash runway of 24 months or more. And then the revenue growth rate, average median growth rate it should be median, it's either average or median, but the median growth rate for this group of companies is roughly about 40% year on year for revenue growth. If we raise volume higher, 36 months kind of cash runway or more, it's about 63% of that, the value is like that. So, and growing them faster than 40%. So, the private enterprise kind of portfolio seems to be healthy, but that's at the end of Q2. So how that data would end up being for Q3, Q4, we'll have to see. Some of the early signals that we do get is that the consumer side of the business of the portfolio have slowed down a lot. There are companies that are growing at, during COVID, because of COVID dividend, growing at 50%, 70%, 80% year on year. They're now growing at 10%, low teens or high single digit growth. So you do see that part of the portfolio slow down quite a bit. The enterprise, on the other extreme, the cloud technology adoption is still very, very strong. The snowflakes of the world are still growing, and that part of the portfolio is much healthier because everybody's working remotely, more companies adopting cloud technologies. So you think about things in last decade was all about rising mobile internet on the consumer side. The next decade is about the rise of cloud technologies. And now we're going to see more industrial applications as well. So Industry 4.0 is a topic that's becoming increasingly popular for people to talk about, that we're in a different era now, and there will be a lot more industrial applications. Those companies tend to grow slower than consumer businesses. So overall, you will see slower growth as a whole for venture, but it will still be healthy because it's the next phase of adoption that we're seeing, and it's happening on a global basis. And we're also seeing a lot more smart tech than ever. So disciplines in electrical engineering took a backseat to computer science over the last 20 years since the 2000 boom and bust, but now it's back in vogue.
I hear several of your talks, and you talk a lot about democratization of technology, and how that impacts people's lives and how you use technology to be able to make people's lives better. Can you elaborate a little bit on the concept, and especially as it relates to, I think, two industries or verticals or whatever sector you want to call it? And I know a couple of which I think you have already made investments in. If you want to talk about those cases, that would be fantastic for the people in the room. One is how it impacts food tech, and not only just the production, but management, delivery, waste. And also one that I think it cuts very close to the hearts of those who live in America, which is health tech. To be able to, and how that's being deployed and what you see as the future of this in the context of democratizing technology.
Starting with health tech first, definitely mental wellness, mental health become a huge topic during COVID. And we see a lot more companies and big companies making acquisitions in this space. Accolade acquired one of our startup, PlusCare, in this area, and you see that becomes almost a necessity as a service to offer to employees. The next area that we're seeing that is generally a lot of demand from employee side is financial wellness, financial health. Slightly different than mental health, obviously, but also something that people used to care about in the time where recession becomes a distinct possibility, if we're not in recession already here in the US. So we are investing in companies that are providing solutions for that, and there will be more of that for sure. But there should be more smart tech in healthcare, and some of the things that our friends in the audience are working on kind of try to address that, and there should be more of it. The adoption may still take time because hospitals are slower in general, but hopefully going through the COVID experience open things up more for more opportunities. So there could be an inflection point for health tech. In terms of food tech, we look at in three different buckets. The last mile delivery is the one that's gotten a lot of funding over the last 3-4 years, obviously, and we're investing in Joker in that 10 as well. And but at the same time, that is evolving in emerging markets to much more of a Costco, Sam's Club kind of model, because if you look at retail in the US, besides Amazon, is the dollar shop that has grown well, it's the Costco's of the world that have grown well. Those are the three sort of growth engines in retail in the US. And you look around the world, there are still many other places that don't have something similar. So I see that the food delivery app eventually has evolved to provide something more sustainable, higher frequency of usage, and much more integral to a user's life. So that's a model that's worth monitoring and seeing. So that's one bucket. And the middle is a lot of efficiency plays. We're invested in Shelf Engine, invested in Kibana, things that are trying to become smart operating systems for grocery chains, for restaurants, to help and analyze data so that in real time they can make adjustments. And over time, because so much transaction data happen on those platforms, lay a embedded fintech solution, buy now, pay later, some kind of short-term financing for that segment makes sense. We're seeing companies experimenting with that. Kibana has Kibana Capital that provides short-term loan over a 1 week period to do buy now, pay later for that. And because you have real-time transaction data at a bank stone, you can adjust much more quickly to that, and you can analyze risk better with more robust data and robust credit and risk models. On the sort of upstream is how do you, which includes food science, how do you come up with products and that is more efficient, higher yield, square foot of area. We're investing in Bowery in New York. That's doing work in the leafy greens and vertical indoor farming. And I think we're going to see more of that for strawberries, for meat, for other things as well. And we're investing in a number of companies in Asia that's trying to, from Singapore, one of them with a Brazilian as a CEO to take that kind of solutions around alternative seafood, alternative chicken, alternative pork to the US and Europe. So we'll see more of that. In general, we're in an era where ESG, climate tech, food tech, these kind of technology that's doing social good, but at the same time providing more access to more people to tech is going to be more popular over the next decade than the last decade.
So we have a lot, I think, the mix. I've met a lot of people yesterday and before as people were arriving to the Bay Area. We have a lot of entrepreneurs in the room. So I want to pick your brain with a very sort of broad question as to what are the sort of top 3 tips, or what are the things that when you're talking to an entrepreneur to see if you're going to invest, that you want an entrepreneur to be doing, or you don't want an entrepreneur to be doing, and you say, well, this is a red flag, not necessarily because of the technology or the solution or the market that you're trying to attack, but on how that is being done by the entrepreneur.
The 3 things why I would invest in a founder. First of all, is someone who's obviously extremely passionate about what he or she does, and very knowledgeable of the pain point that he or she is trying to solve. When you have technology trying to find a solution that never works, very hard to make that work. And usually, even doesn't work is a small outcome. Knowing the problem, why it is important, why it's massive, why it needs to be solved, is the number 1 thing. Secondly, is someone who learns extremely quickly. Nobody has all the answers in the world. The person that shows that they can learn very quickly, adjust very quickly, and make the right decision along the way, that kind of judgment and ability to learn is extremely important. And thirdly, obviously, leadership. Can you recruit a great team? And it may not be as fair to the first-time founder, but usually, we did a vlog with Tony Fadell recently, and he said the best time to be a founder is between 35 and 45. Because you worked already, and you work first in a big company, and then work in a venture-backed company. You see how things are done, you accumulate your credibility, kind of accomplishments along the way. Then when you're ready to do a startup, you're going to be people who are going to be believing you, work with you before you join you, and you're much more ready as a result. So it's not the best advice to people who end up being Peter Thiel fellows and so forth. But it's, when you look at the big outcomes, more of them have come from folks that have done something before that. There's always a Google, there's always a Facebook that flies in the face of that, and Airbnb. So there are plenty of examples otherwise. But having that battle scars and experiences give you a higher chance of success, even if it's not $1 trillion outcome or $500 billion outcome.
Yeah, I saw there was a piece on CNBC, I think a couple of days ago, that in LATAM, in 2022, even though we've seen obviously decline of the growth in late stage capital, early stage was still pretty strong, and 40% of the companies getting funded were actually led by serial entrepreneurs. So I think shows how the region is getting mature enough to be able to go to your point about, okay, better invest in experienced entrepreneurs. What about going global? So obviously venture capitalists are looking for X's and multiples and returns that is off the charts. Does that need to be something from the offset? And there was a theme yesterday about, do entrepreneurs need to solve first their problem locally or whatever issue they're trying to address? Or do they already need to start from the offset with a global strategy? How do you see that mentality and strategy in the companies that you invest in?
Yeah, I think first of all, LATAM is big enough. If someone solves a problem for LATAM, it's already a very potentially huge outcome. And sometimes the problem that's local has global implications. You look at Airbnb, it started very local. But when you look at that business, you can imagine that it could be, if people are willing to put out homes for strangers and more willing to do that, it travels naturally a global business. So a lot of times you have to find a problem that's local, and you hope that a problem has global implications, and naturally over time you'll end up building global business. So we like to go global because we think that's a much bigger outcome, but there's so many things that can be better in LATAM, so there's plenty of stuff to do in LATAM already.
So I think last time we spoke, where I saw you speaking at the last BayBrazil conference, you were talking about e-commerce being something really big that you saw. And this was, what was it, Mike? Is it 2019, I think? Yeah, right. I don't know between which COVID variant we were at, but
last year, in November,
right.
Between Delta and Omicron.
There you go. That's how we calculate time nowadays. Thank you, my lady. And what are the trends that you're seeing now? Is it still e-commerce something that you're focused on and looking into? Are there any new areas that you see that since then have sort of caught your eye and something that or things that you're looking that will be, I don't know, 5 years from now, something that you want to get ahead of the curve and look into?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I mean, the last decade is about consumer internet adoption on mobile. That's definitely a big trend. E-commerce will still continue to grow because e-commerce penetration rate in emerging markets, even in the US, is still in the teens or below teens. So there's still room to grow. But we do see faster growth on the enterprise side for the next decade because there's just more, everyone has iPhone or Android phone now. So the businesses start to adopt cloud technologies. And so that growth, as we're seeing right now during the sort of post-COVID dividend time, we do see less growth on the enterprise side. We will still invest in consumer, but there's just more things to invest now than before.
And in terms of actual technology being deployed, Web3 and other sources of new technology that have been rising in the past few years. Anything that you've seen or you would like to see more of being deployed, or where you think entrepreneurs, obviously each entrepreneur is trying to solve their own business idea that they have, but by using technology that you think that if resources are allocated by the entrepreneurs themselves in a particular type of technology, a type of area that you think will improve people's lives in a way that we haven't thought of yet?
I think right now, especially for LATAM, there's so many things that people around the world have innovated, but it's still not available in LATAM. For example, just taking everyday example, a lot of corporates, when it comes to managing expenses, is still on Excel spreadsheet. Yet in the US, you see Brex, with founders coming from Brazil, building global business, Ramp growing, and even Rippling, which is sort of in a payroll HR space, expanding into corporate spend area. And there are companies in LATAM trying to solve that, and they're learning extremely quickly from best practices in the US and Europe and elsewhere. And so we are seeing a lot of smart LATAM founders who are second-time founder or second-time entrepreneur, just absorbing information, knowledge very quickly on a global basis, and recruiting talent from around the globe to help them to build business much faster in LATAM. So I think LATAM will end up, some of the best companies will end up growing faster than the counterparts in US and Europe and elsewhere, because they learn quickly and also know the local pain points a lot. So I look at LATAM as almost like when I was in China on the ground. I was in China between 2005 and 2013. During that time, you see China went through 2 or 3 different generations of founders. And I feel that LATAM is going through that rapid growth period where founders have seen what's it like to be a VC-backed company and try a couple times already, and the second or third time is a charm for them to really have the best practices globally become the scale. And so, regardless of what happens in the macro, right now is a great time to be doing startups in LATAM.
Couple more questions. I gotta keep me honest on the time. So you just touched upon macro, and so most of the cases I hear is, well, it doesn't matter what the government does, it doesn't matter what regulators do, it doesn't matter, we're there to solve problems, and this is what we're investing in. You invested in a lot of emerging companies and a lot of emerging countries. How do you see overall, or in your experience of what you have done, how LATAM countries, and I know we speak LATAM, but each country is very unique, so, but in your experience, how are you seeing, not the regulatory, but just the sort of acceptance by government and the willingness of government to be able to help, assist, as compared to other emerging countries that you have invested in and as compared to LATAM, specifically Brazil for that matter?
You know, for me, I was born in Taiwan, and so I'm a Taiwanese American, and seeing even how Taiwan has a national policy on growth of semiconductor industry, and then which can eventually produce TSMC and UMC. And TSMC now is, you know, the largest foundry in the world with market cap in $100 billion range, and with higher market cap than Intel, which is hard to believe, hard to imagine that 10 years ago. And so when you see that happen, you can see the impact of government policy done right make a difference. Look at LATAM, you know, for Brazil to come out with PIX is incredible. We saw that with UPI India and what that did to expedite the growth of online business in India. So when the government can make those right policy decisions and make things happen, it does help founders locally a lot. So it can be an enabler. It doesn't happen as often as we would like, and governments don't screw things up with wrong policies. More often than not, it is what it is. So you have to be aware of not just the benefits, but also challenges that they can bring as well.
You've done a lot. I think I kind of, in my own head, I think of you as sort of like a unicorn predictor with a good crystal ball. And so you've done a lot and you've seen a lot. So it's a twofold question. First is, what do you see in the long term for tech in emerging countries, especially LATAM, and especially Brazil, given the theme. And then two, after doing this for so many years and getting it right, I'm sure you got it wrong too, but getting it right so many times, what is the thing that motivates you personally to every day go in and continue doing what you're doing and helping companies grow? So it's a two-part question. You can address it any way you want, but that was something that I woke up this morning thinking, well, I gotta ask Hans that question before we're out.
I remember, and I don't want to embarrass him, but it's something I do remember. I remember hosting Hugo and his friends to visit China in 2006. Three smart, good-looking guys. Go to China, see what's it like. It was one of them was extremely smart, thoughtful, and have exposure in tech. And in China in 2006, where almost you feel like anything is possible, unlike today, that tech can make impact in society, and government didn't care, didn't know much about it. Just seeing that was possible, and then 7 years later, 4 years later, I invested in Xiaomi, and then 7 years later, seeing Hugo joining Xiaomi and taking that global, that was transformational for many users around the world. And invest in companies like an Airbnb, where why would you ever put up your homes up for strangers to live in? And see that change people's experiences and the values and the way they think about the new world. When you get to invest in companies like that, and you see founders working hard to solve problems. I still remember going to some of the startups in India or Brazil, and after 8, 9, 10 o'clock, and see people working hard, trying to make things happen. It just makes me feel like, I'm an optimist and a humanist, and so it just makes me feel hopeful about what the future can be, even with all the problems that we're facing in the world. And the fact that the more problems there are in the world, the more opportunities there are for smart founders to try to solve them with tech. And so seeing that happen, being part of their journey, just gives me great joy. And money is a byproduct, but not the end goal. And seeing things being better with people who care is something that will always make me happy every day waking up in the morning to work with founders like that.
It's probably good to have that. I'm a lawyer, so I'm the writer of the apocalypse. I have to figure out. But I want to wait for questions because I'm sure we're going to have tons of them, and my brain is limited to as many questions as I can come up with.
Speaking of the devil.
I've known you for 16 years. Thank you again for graciously showing us around the place in China in 2006. That was a life-changing week for sure. And knowing you for that long, I can speak with certainty or confidence when I say you're one of the best pattern matchers that I've ever met. And through pattern matching, you've made some incredible bets. Very interestingly and relatively unusually, you have invested in China, Xiaomi, Dianping, you've invested in India, Udon, Snapdeal, etc. You invested in Southeast Asia, of course, and also here in the Valley. And everybody knows that you've turned your attention to LATAM in a pretty significant way over the last few years. So back to pattern matching. I'm curious what your pattern matching machine learning algorithm tells you is different or very different or very similar in LATAM compared to the other regions that you've invested in. And particularly, whether you think LATAM companies are natively better or worse structured to go global compared to Southeast Asia, India, etc.
Great question. What got us interested in LATAM was when DD made that initial investment in '99 with SoftBank. And I already know Uber think highly of LATAM. It's the second largest market for Uber, and it's fast growing. But seeing DD doing that shocked me because there's no direct flight from Beijing to Sao Paulo. Just like there's no direct flight from San Francisco to Sao Paulo yet. And it's it has LATAM has become a market that global giants have to pay attention to. The challenge is always like how you get exits. And back then it was through M&A, had to sell. But with Nubank going public and become a successful IPO, and catch a lot of people's attention and see companies like dLocal doing it too. And I started with dLocal founders come to see us, and they won a $100 million round, but 90% is a secondary share sale. So I was like thinking, what am I missing here? It's a great business, but why would you want to sell? So we end up missing that investment. That's one of my mistakes. And so it is a region that had quote unquote suffered for a long time with a lot of when we start looking at LATAM, a lot of U.S. consumer investors already tell us, why are you doing that without so much money in it? Don't do it. But as a humanist and an optimist, it feels like tech could be the differentiation this time, and it can make a bigger impact. And it's actually meeting the founders in LATAM. And from 2018, when we started looking at LATAM to now 2023, even in this 4 years, soon to be 5 years, you see the quality of the founders evolving and changing very rapidly. Many of the founders that we talk to, as you guys know, come from, especially younger founders, come from consulting background, banking background. They could have done other things, professional jobs, that choose to drink the Kool-Aid and do this. They may not succeed the first time, but I know from looking at China and other emerging markets before, it's the second or third time that makes a difference. And the more people want to do that, the more likely you have bigger pool of talent to draw from. In terms of engineering talent, it used to be a problem before, but now having more engineers throughout LATAM be willing to work remotely in Argentina and other places it becomes less of an issue than before. Still an issue, but less of an issue. And it will be interesting to see other talent around the world, especially for example, India, go to LATAM to help to build even global team. Southeast Asia, not many companies have broken up, become global. C is probably the only one I can think of. Grab and others are choose not to. Some of the Indian companies have tried it. But for the most part, it's only the Chinese company and the Israeli company, some European company have successfully go global. So still not as easy to do that. But I think that for the next phase, focus on building big Latin giants for the next 10 years will be a great place to start. And I would take a longer term view is in the next decade. After that, after this decade, it makes sense for them to build that global businesses. If any Chinese company had they tell me back in 2000 or 2005 they want to build a global player, it's like, dude, come on, it's not realistic. But there were plenty of founders who look up to the U.S. and want to do something, and ends up being the Zhang Yiming of ByteDance, and Shein and Pinduoduo ends up trying to become that, and obviously Xiaomi. And so I think it will take more time, but there's no reason, given the natural resources available in Latam, you cannot build amazing food companies that can go global. So I'm hopeful that it will happen, and when there are more globalized talent from Latam that work other places go back, it makes that much easier. I mean, if you didn't join Xiaomi, I don't think Xiaomi will ever have a successful global expansion. So having those kind of people be attractive enough that the people with globalized experience want to join them is going to be important. And I think that over the next 10 years, we will see that coming out of that.
Please say your name and company.
Hi, Zuka Paladino here from Woke. You talked about the ability to learn learn quickly, a very, very important traits. And when we think of the talent flywheel, the amount of second-time founders, third-time founders, new companies, new investments, there isn't that talent pool available. So what is your secret sauce from the perspective of naturally you're going to have to pull a lot of that talent, especially leadership positions from traditional markets. You mentioned eventually that you like to see people that work for corporations and then come into the startup life. What's your formula for success, as this is a big figure for a lot of founders? So,
depending on what industry you're in, for consumer business, there actually are quite a bit of talent from CPG and fast-moving consumer goods. Those who are well trained in that category, but shops online often or likes internet services are easiest and most accessible pool to choose from. This didn't happen for China, because China, both CPG and e-commerce grew up about the same time. So it was hard to do that, but even Alibaba still recruit someone from Home Depot, China, to join them. In India, we're seeing a lot more of that. Because in CPG, FMCG, you learn about looking at your customer personas and figuring out who are your users through a lot of focus group studies and online surveys. And that helped to think about how to target users better, because you know your customers better. A lot of internet companies focus on CAC and focus on just different growth channels, but it's not as efficient. So they don't have the training that somebody from fast-moving consumer goods or CPG have. And so I think that's natural. For enterprises, the best place is still the other big enterprise companies, tech companies, specifically Microsoft and Google and other places. But it's hard to get people out of that unless they're really passionate about startup, because the pay is good, and so you actually have to embrace the challenge and do something different in order to leave a Google, a cushy job to join a startup. So we have seen that it's less about experiences, more about personality for enterprise play. But you're building a fintech company, you need to have someone who will know the banking scene. So those are the obvious places to look at. But it still comes down to, is this person naturally curious that wants change? I think that my wife always tells me, she doesn't think I can stay in one place for too long. You naturally want to try different things. So you want to hire people who naturally want to experiment and not be happy with status quo.
My question relates to.
Name and company, please. Your name and company,
Oh, I'm
Rick.
sorry. This is Rick Liu. My question is related to the regulatory constraints from different countries and how US VC operates. So from my experience last year, 2021 has been pretty bad because I had 11 digits to be invested in semiconductor because it had China money in it. So all my 3 deals got shut down by CFIUS. And however, Brazilian friends, because I'm from Brazil, so I got all Brazilian friends, and Brazilian government is very open. They don't care where the capital comes from, so they're very open-minded. If it's from China, if it's from US, it doesn't matter. So I wanted to ask you, Hans, is this trade war between US and China has been expected to affect you as a VC?
Yeah. After President Trump came back from China, from Beijing, towards the end of 2017, I was fortunate to be invited to a panel to VC in January 2018. And up there, I'm talking about being hopeful, humanist, and the tech will make things better. And then immediately from the audience, you can see a lot of animosity towards big tech, and a lot of sort of worry about China. So I came back from that trip saying that, hey, we live in a bubble, and the rest of the world doesn't think that way. And it's a very different environment. People ask me about pattern recognition. When I hear that, it reminds me of 1945, 1950, and the language is so eerily similar from that era. So we have to start making adjustments and think differently. And so for GGV, all 5 owners, we have 2 Singaporeans, 1 Taiwanese American, and 2 other people who are from here. And so it's we know that there will be different perception, different way of doing things. CFIUS was what people start to talk about, and you just have to reorganize your business differently because it is a different era. And the prosperity that we all fortunately enjoyed from 1978 to now is practically over. So if that's the case, you have to think about differently and reorient differently. And over the last 4 years, we evolved quite a bit from before just US-China cross-border investments to a lot more global. And it's easier because to us, China was the first foreign market that we entered. Now, and coming from Southeast Asia, it's easy to go back to Southeast Asia and then look at other emerging markets who could be on par with China over time. It's obvious that it has to be a combination of India, Southeast Asia, and Latin. So, and eventually, who knows, maybe even Africa as well. So, these are the things that you just have to be aware of and move quickly. So, it's not surprising that when Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan, the only companies that she had 2 meetings with was TSMC. And TSMC is stepping up their investments here in the US. And so I teach 1 class for Eric Schmidt for his Stanford GSB MBA class. And the topic is always about US-China tech. And you just see the difference over the last 4 years, how people think about it. And Eric and I had like each other and have a good dialogue about this. And the importance of Taiwan in the overall scheme of things increased dramatically because 92% of all chips made with 10 nanometer or less processes are by TSMC or from Taiwan. And so it's anything that happened there is extremely sensitive to the global supply chain. So that's something that regardless of what happened with Ukraine and Russia, American government pays heavy attention to, and we have to do that as well. So we don't make any semiconductor investments in China with our US dollar funds. It's just not worth doing for us.
Hi, I'm Victor Meyer from Factory Investments.
I'm from Brazil, and educational levels there and in Latin America as a whole, they are relatively low compared to the US, Europe, and Asia. We think that in the medium term or in the long term, that this can make the development of technology more difficult, since we don't have so much skilled workforce as compared to Asia, for example.
Yeah, that's why, we are bullish on a tech business in Latam. Over time, it probably needs more institutional and private enterprise efforts to grow that workforce for tech. And I'm always curious when if a Latam team can build up a R&D center in India and tap into the tech workforce there. You look at all the tech giants, unicorns out of Southeast Asia, every single one of them have an R&D center, engineering center in Bangalore. There are not enough engineers in Southeast Asia to make that work, to accommodate it work. So this kind of cross-border business over time probably will end up happening. Right now it's early stage, so it is definitely more, require more work. But over time, you can imagine it will be more cross-border linkages in order to enable bigger growth in tech.
Chris Knight with the Davino Group. In attending Disrupt this week, there's a couple of clear trends that I saw, including NFTs and a lot of excitement about real-world ways that you can put them to use. For example, within ticketing, to get rid of the issue of ticketing fraud. The other big thing I saw was a lot of African entrepreneurs and investors that were interested in Africa. I know eBanks, the fintech that I work with, has just expanded there. So I'd love to get your thoughts on NFTs in Africa.
Yeah. Africa, definitely are companies emerging, and we couldn't spend as much time on it because we're stressed as is with coverage we have. But there are e-commerce IPOs out of Africa for the last 2 years, and those companies are still growing, they're going through ups and downs. And now both our friends from Asia and some of the friends here from the East Coast are looking at Africa. So it's still early, definitely a lot earlier than Latam or Southeast Asia or India, but definitely you can see the similar pattern emerging in Africa, and a lot of strategic players are investing, especially from Asia, are investing in Africa because they see the similar patterns. So again, early, but hopeful.
Do we have to wrap it up? Or
Another 3-4 minutes.
3 or 4 minutes, okay, I can ask 15 questions in that period of time. So specifically about Brazil and the investment that you have made in Brazil, to close out with the theme of the conference, what are the things that you saw in Brazil 10 years ago that you see that have been evolved, and the thing that entrepreneurs did to be able to solve problems, and the things that you think are going to be I think Brazil had one of the largest numbers of fintechs in the world, given the economy, the concentration of the banks. What do you see for Brazil specifically from 5 or 10 years from now?
Yeah. When you see, again, you see new bank being built. I remember for China, Chinese internet sector did not become something that people treated seriously until in the span of 2 years, Tencent, Shunda Gaming, Baidu, and Ctrip went public. And then people were saying, oh, this is actually a viable thing to do. Before that, there was a bunch of people doing semiconductor ventures, a lot of people doing open source software kind of ventures, and no one took them seriously for a variety of reasons. So when as Nubank goes public, and then throughout Latam, other places, more startups go public, people will think differently about this sector if you can attract more talent. For Brazil in particular, fintech, I'm a personal investor probably in 5 or 6 fintech companies, and none of 5 or 6 sort of e-commerce related, marketplace related companies. And I like to do more food tech investments in Brazil as well, just given the natural resources there. So I feel like the best company from Brazil that could go global probably will end up leveraging both tech and natural resources of Brazil to make a difference. So it will be interesting to see what type of regional, if not global, companies Brazil will have. And we're starting to see companies doing brands and companies doing enterprise in Brazil. Given the need for enterprise development, cloud technologies, and some are SMBs oriented, increasingly more are medium and larger enterprise oriented, I just feel that enterprise will be a segment that Brazil will produce winners as well. So there are, great number of great VCs from Brazil here in the audience, and so if you ask them, they do see a lot of startups. What lacks is capital. It's not as easy to get because of the bias of U.S. institutional investors or the experience they had before. It's harder for more growth stage funds to be in Brazil. GE has done an amazing job building a franchise there. Recently, you see DST, you see Cotu and Tiger doing investments. But being committed to the region, staying in the region for the long haul, have offices, have people on the ground, those are things that need to be done in order to grow a much bigger venture. I think it's a matter of time, but it does take more people to be involved. Fortunately, over the last few years, you do see younger partners in the US, especially on the consumer side, spend more time in that tech. I'm hoping, given their age, they're more willing to spend, if not live in that tech, to make it easier. And fundamentally, to make a difference is to have exits. So if there are companies that got funded along the way, can go public, there'll be more new banks, or you even decide to delocals, it will help institutional money to feel differently about the region, and therefore get more VCs to get more excited to invest in.
What a wonderful note.
I agree. That's a perfect way to end. Hans, thank you so much for your time. Agarizi, thank you so much for the platform that you gave us. Really, really appreciate it. It's been an honor talking to you this morning.
Thank you for having me.